into the heart of the city. In our Kickstarter this morning, we want to look at Kampala. What is hindering Kampala's development? With all the efforts, with all the talk, what is hindering Kampala's development? What is sustainable planning, and what are the challenges that could enable us to realize that we actually need to pay more attention to sustainable planning for a city that is still growing? I am Priscilla Regina Naluoga. Welcome to our Kickstarter. The backbone of it is that Kampala is one of Africa's fastest growing cities, and this is with an annual population growth rate of 5.6%. Consequently, the city does face significant pressure on its infrastructure as well as urban systems. Now, with the recent ringing alarm on the administration of the city, financing has also been another issue. Business survival and the development levels of the city are things that we've been questioning ourselves ever so often. Well, today we get to speak to these issues, and we get to be joined by those that are going to be giving us this food of thought for the solutions and the way forward to see a better city 2025. We are being joined by Engineer David Luyimbazi, former Deputy Executive Director at Kampala Capital City Authority, and of course he's an infrastructure development specialist who's going to be giving us his expertise on why Kampala is underdeveloped at this day and era. There's mud all over the place. I mean, today's Daily Monitor picture gives you, a snippet into what Kampala looks like when it rains. It rained heavily yesterday morning, and so young people having to enjoy a dance in the mud. It's a good picture for the African person who relates very well to mud. But when you look at developmental comparisons across the globe, it's not really a beautiful picture to look at. And so it's a rock and a hard place. Engineer, good morning to you, and how are you?
Good morning, Priscilla. Thanks for hosting me. I'm fine.
How are you enjoying the rains? Where you stayed, do you get to have some flooding? Last week's rains, did they affect you in any way?
Obviously, they did affect me. You talked about sustainable development. Now, when we talk about sustainable development, we're talking about how do we exist now while taking care of the future. Now, of course, that calls for actions on all parties. Many times we try to assign responsibilities to government alone to fix problems that are sometimes created by poor conduct of citizens of Kampala. Now look at the current situation we have in Kampala of this frequent flooding whenever it rains. Now, if we don't protect the wetlands, if we invade the wetlands, decide to degrade them, over the last 30 years, about 80% of the wetland cover has been degraded. 80%.
Right.
Not 5, not 10. 80%, and only 10% of the wetland cover is active. And wetlands are the first line of defense against floods. They act like a sponge. Whenever there is a downpour, they contain the water. Then the water is released slowly after being filtered into the lake. Now, if 80% has been degraded by development, you can't even pay for it. We can't even buy ourselves out of the problem. Now, what's supposed to be a sponge receiving water, now it is an impervious surface over which water is running. What do you do for that?
Okay.
Now, then the drainage reserves. We have about 10 drainage systems. The Lubiji, the Nachivo, Chinawataka, Kansanga drainage channels. The drainage reserves have all been invaded as well. Over 2 million people have decided to develop and stay in those wetlands and drainage reserves because perceptively they look to be free. Because they're not titled, you don't have to pay anyone, and you go and develop there. 2 million people. 2 million, not 100,000, not 10,000, but 2 million people are living there.
Okay. All right. That's a very big vehicle that we have to drive through as we navigate this conversation this morning. Yusuf Sserunkuma, you're most welcome to this program, and a pleasure to have you. How easy was it for you to make it to NTV?
To here?
Yeah, because the rains that have been coming down this morning.
No, I managed to get my way here. It wasn't very difficult.
Is it tarmac for you all the way? Or do you have some construction spots that are happening from your home?
There are parts which are left, that you can manage to drive.
All right.
But if you live in Kampala, you get used to this kind of stuff. But, however short the distance is going to be, you have to think about an hour and a half to get there. Especially the Kampala is not like a super big city. I live in Maganjo, which is about 7 kilometers from the city square, but you have to plan an hour to get here. And if you don't do that, the usual mess happens.
So between Maganjo and Serena, what in your observation do you see are the hindrances for development of our city?
I wouldn't focus just between Maganjo and here, but that distance also is very telling. You have to look at a couple of things happened. And unlike him, I'm going to squarely blame the government because, the neoliberal character of our development in this country. You see a crisis, we embraced a thing that we fully didn't understand. In the 1990s, when Yoweri Museveni was president, he took on this neoliberal character that the city was left to the people. So if you look at the houses we have, for example, the housing crisis in Kampala, it's because everybody can build a house wherever they want, as long as they own that piece of land. This is why you find factories in residential neighborhoods, right? If you find houses, facing the opposite direction of each other but accessing the same road, this is why you find conflicts over passageways to people's houses. Because, you look at Kampala, most of the supposedly wealthier neighborhoods of Kampala, they are actually sort of rich people's slums, right? Because there's no planning whatsoever. Cities are supposed to be planned by the state or by the council authority. Not just cities, but all settlement is planned by the state. The people, ask the people on Wananchi, tend to, once you have your money, once you get your money, you acquire a piece of land, you just build. Yeah. Right? So the neoliberal culture that we embraced in the 1990s, the government pulled out, not just of developing the city, but also developing, urban settlements. So the urban settlements you have in Kampala are completely unplanned. This is why when he said 80% of our wetlands have been degraded, you don't blame the people. The people need a government. We are, as individuals, selfish. We are selfish, we are egocentric. We need a state which is strong enough to control our whims, our excitement, our ego, our selfishness needs to be regulated by the state. So what happened to this country? The state pulled out. It didn't pull out just in regulating what people do, it also pulled out in funding development. Right? This is why, to the government of Mr. Museveni, Kampala is an afterthought. It's an afterthought. So it has been reduced to simply a place of politics, not a place of development. Right? So as an afterthought, this is why you see, construction is now happening on a very rapid scale because remember they have budget timelines they have to fulfill because these delays, I think according to Daily Monitor, I think 2 days ago, we spent 700 billion on money which is as penalties on money which are not spent. This is the amount of money we spent between 2013 and 2023 and 2024. 700 billion as penalties on unspent money. Because they're tired legs, old men running the country, lazy people trying to, take cuts here and there. At the end of the day, construction doesn't happen because it's an afterthought, right? So a couple of things happening is you have to first of all understand the neoliberal character of this city. That government did not only pull out in giving money to the state, but also regulating. Now, at the end of the day, you have big men, supposedly big men, people a little excited with money. As soon as they get their money, they are happy to degrade our wetland because they are connected to a very lazy state which doesn't think about regulation. That's why 80% of those wetlands are not regulated by ordinary individuals like you and myself. They're degraded by very wealthy, connected individuals. They're not like really wealthy, but they have connections. And because the government is lazy, they can do whatever they want.
Okay. All right. Regulating what people do and not funding development in the country, points that Yusuf has pointed out quite clearly. Engineer, having been at the helm of leadership at KCCA in the last 4 years, this puts you in the hotspot. It is true that, and it's a discussion that you and I were having earlier on, and I was asking myself, with the continued works that have been done on, for example, area codes like the Lugogo bypass, why do we continue to see drainage issues and challenges every time the rains come down heavy on us. And yet there was a construction going on to clear the drainage previous or months prior to these rain seasons that come our way. And you were explaining to me that there are certain ways that we're meant to be settling or developing certain areas of our city. Talk to us about that.
No, okay, I'll talk about that, but I'll also come back to talk what Mr. Sserunkuma has tried to bring a political spin to the game and trying to make it appear like we don't have personal responsibility at individual level to make sure the city looks the way it is. Now, wetlands, there are limited developments allowed in wetlands. A wetland, as I told you, is a sponge. It's supposed to receive water, contain water, and release it slowly into the drainage system and into the lake. You're not supposed to make it an impervious system so it begins to run, water needs to run over it. It's supposed to receive and contain water. Now, much of Logogo, which is a wetland, has been turned into a development. So water is running off rather than being absorbed. Now, I'll come to the issue of this city. We're talking about 2 million people who are living in wetlands and drainage reserves. These are the poorest of the poor in Kampala. The rich are only but a few. And where the rich have developed in wetlands, they've actually installed drainage systems because the infrastructure they have built requires to be protected from water. So the people who are actually suffering and paying are the informal groups, the poor people, the urban poor. They're the ones who die when it rains, when it floods, because they can't afford the infrastructure to protect them when it rains. So where does it become personal responsibility? How long?
Before we go to personal responsibility, I think let's also put into perspective the topography of the city that we are talking about, because it's not a flat land from A to Z.
True.
We are in between 7 and counting hills, and it puts us in a place of, first we need to understand that by nature, where our city lies is already in a place where there's need for a lot of investment, a lot of funding in order to have a habitable city, because if the rains are coming down, they're coming down into the valleys. Of course, the poor people are the ones that are settled in the valleys. The drainage systems are all into the valleys, and if those valleys are not really catered to, the drainage systems within those valleys are not fully catered to, it's going to be affecting everything else that should be going on in the heart of the city.
Of course, the issue here is that we have the issue of rapid urbanization that is going on in the city. Whenever you urbanize, the area or the surface area that is not infiltrating water increases. So the runoff increases. So the drainage system must be continually upgraded because the city is a living organism. So you find that the drainage systems of the old days are still in existence right now.
And that point right there is something that we continuously ask ourselves on this side, that how is it that we're continuously relying on the naturally existing drainage systems for Kampala when we have the opportunity to create artificial drainage systems to deal with the issues at hand?
Now the challenge is this: if we cannot afford to maintain the existing natural drains, the Luyimbazi, the Nachivubo, the Chinawataka, those are natural drains. They're supposed to grab the runoff and take it to the lake or take it into the wetland system. We don't have sufficient money at the moment to even maintain and upgrade them to the standard they should be. Now, how can we create new artificial drains? So there's a constraint of resources. That's a fact. There's a constraint of resources. But again, there are things we can do, things I would call own goals, that are creating the crisis. If we don't degrade wetlands, you'll find that 40 to 60% of the drainage capacity will be restored. If we don't have poor solid waste practices where we dispose garbage in the drainage channels, 20 to 40% of the drainage capacity will be restored. So before we even look for financing, there are practices we can implement that can reduce the acuteness or the severity of the problem we're facing right now. That's what I'm saying.
All right. You had a response to what Yusuf had mentioned earlier when it comes to...
He said many interesting things. Let it respond.
No, but let him first respond to you first. Yusuf, let him first respond to you first.
Let me finish.
No, he did respond. He did respond.
You politicized the...
Yes.
You brought a political element to...
And you want us to treat us simply technical?
It is... I mean, there is more that can be done. Before, leave the politics alone. Now, if people don't invade these wetlands and degrade them, okay? When you degrade the wetland, you're destroying about 40 to 60% of the drainage capacity immediately. Now, that's possible. I mean, why should you go and build on a plot of land that is gazetted for drainage purposes?
Oh,
wait.
No, let him finish.
He has.
No, he hasn't finished. You don't determine that, Yusuf.
No, if people dispose their garbage in drainage channels, that's bad manners. Now, you degrade about 20 to 40% of the drainage function immediately by behaving badly in the city. The government is not telling you to do that. It is your bad manners. If you're in the city, you need to protect it. If you want to live well, if you're complaining about drainage, you've created the flooding problem.
So management practices should be starting from an individual level, community level.
If we have this mindset that government is going to correct everything, every mistake that we make, we do deliberately, we're in the wrong place.
Okay. What's your comment on what he said, that we do have the so-called rich or well-connected of this country having to put up development against what you are actually talking about?
Good.
All simply because they have the money or the connections to do so.
And I told you.
And you as an authority, formally authority.
Yeah, I told you, some of these things are historical and they're systemic. We have 2 million people living in wetlands in drainage reserves. Not all of them are rich.
The 2 million people living there they're living there because the authority is failing to evacuate them or relocate them to better places. Why would the authority actually be looking day in, day out, knowing the impact of their existence in those places?
The way I would put it is like how you live in your house, how you want to keep it clean, keep it orderly. You don't have to be whipped to do that.
Okay.
You don't have to be told to do that. If you decide to have an unsanitary condition in your house, it's your problem. It comes to you as an individual.
Mr. Luyimbazi, before I put up this house, I have to, interact with an engineer. I have to interact with let me say, the community administration in order to put up this structure. Before it becomes mine as a structure, it is having other responsibility elements. Mr. Yusuf, you have a response to what he said.
We did the Kampala Wetland exhibition online. And it happened about that time. These people had evicted. I don't know if we were still there. Had kicked up people from BBG. The riffraffs, they were not inching. And as soon as they'd finished that, a rich man had started, dropping soil into that place, trying to degrade it for construction.
And for the rich man, they will say that they've done an environmental impact assessment.
They're just, draining the place, dumping huge amounts of soil with these big graders. Poor people don't have graders. Hamis Chigundu, Elias Lukwagas told us, built on the Jiglo of the Natural Channel. Suniru Pereira was dropping soil in Lake Victoria, trying to drain it. The people who are draining the road from Kampala to Buziga, along that stretch, are not poor people. The people who built Bond. Nakawa are not poor. That place was done by what's the former ED, the one who was kicked out, the woman, the first ED of Kampala, Jennifer Msisi, built that place 3 times. Elias Kwagas told us about the Kampala master plan. The people failing the Kampala master plan are people with connections. So you would accuse the 2 million people as much as you want, but also remember, the 2 million people utilize wetlands. They don't degrade them. It's the problem with the conservation movement, especially by the technicians. You tend to think that ordinary people using wetlands to grow yams and build their ramshackles and sugarcane are actually spoiling the wetland.
They've built houses.
They built ramshackles.
Okay.
They're not farming.
All right, so we're going to take a short breather and reorganize ourselves to also have Honorable Balimwezo joining us on this debate. Do stay with us. All right, thank you so much for still being with us here Morning at NTV. The big question that we have before us in our Kickstarter this morning is what is hindering Kampala's development in 2025, many years down the road. Sustainable planning challenges for Kampala. I am Priscilla Regina Naruoga. Thank you so much for still being with us. Of course, as Kampala is facing many significant challenges ranging from the rapid population growth, inadequate infrastructure, the poor sanitation and waste management, issues of governance and corruption, all these are impacting the supposed urban development and the quality of life that we should be enjoying as residents of Kampala. But also, this is supposed to be a picture for the other cities that are in place across the country. If the things are not done well within the capital city, how do we expect them to be translated into the other cities of the country? So this does not leave out the other cities of this country. My guests this morning, Engineer David Luyimbazi, former Deputy Executive Director at the highest authority of Kampala, KCCA. We also do have Yusuf Sserunkuma. He's an analyst, and also we are being joined by Honorable Ronald Balimwezo, Shadow Minister for Kampala. You're most welcome, Sevo.
Thank you so much. Good morning, viewers.
Good morning to you too. Yeah. You found us in a heated debate on whose responsibility is it? Is it the citizen or the government in ensuring that, first of all, we settle in the right places, we take care of the places that we settle in, and we also address the challenges of where we have settled in. I would like to pick up your remarks.
I think all the residents of Kampala have a stake in what is happening in Kampala. There is a lot of impunity, lack of rule of law. If we had rule of law, whereby everyone was following the law to the dot, I think we wouldn't have serious challenges. We have in place management tools that would reserve our city or even much better than it is now. But we have corruption, we have lack of planning and implementation, and simply because we also lack enforcement. We have in store the Kampala Master Plan, Kampala Drainage Master Plan, that was first put in place by the late Sebana Chizito in 2003. This master plan was supposed to address the issue of drainage. But important to note is that God created Kampala as a unique city with hills and valleys, low-lying areas. And in the low-lying areas, he gave us the ecosystem. Very important system that was supposed to be a basin for water, a dam for water, particularly storm water. He has talked about urbanization. Indeed, it's true that where there is urbanization, the built-up space increases rapidly, and eventually you get a lot of runoff, surface runoff. And now this runoff was supposed to be directed to the swamp, the ecosystem, where we have the filtering media, the Chitogo. That is the best natural filtering media for the water. Because as you're aware that the practices of our people have so much affected the environment. When you talk about garbage, we generate 2,500 tons of garbage. But Kampala capital city only collects in a range of 700 tons. Not tell me 1,500. 1,200. No, 700 when you calculate, considering the capacity of the trucks that you have. Now, all this garbage is, the remaining garbage is either burnt or it is thrown in the streets of Kampala. And eventually, when it rains, it blocks the waterways. But also it's important to note that the rich have degraded the wetlands terribly. And I'll give you typical examples. Come to Nakawa. Chinawataka swamp has been encroached on by Mera Investments, owned by one tycoon called Sidiru. 90%. So you can imagine that ecosystem that was taking on the water from Ntinda, Banda, Kamuli, was all taken over. When you come to Bugolobi, the entire stretch of Bugolobi, wetland, the Nachivubo channel has been taken over by, which company is this that brought you almost problems? that company. No, the logistic something, Majestic.
Majestic, yeah.
Majestic. It has taken over that wetland. Recently I was fighting with them. In fact, I wanted to ban their trucks. Because it was so hurting to see that all that ecosystem has been destroyed by the rich. It's quite frustrating. Then important also to note is that we have the Kampala master plan, drainage master plan, that was supposed to address the issue of drainage. But it has not been implemented. It hasn't. Despite the fact that we have monies, we had the KIDIP 2 that was supposed to address those issues. There wasn't money for compensation. So the issue is all about corruption, lack of implementation of the drainage, the Kampala drainage master plan, and impunity of the highest degree. So those are the greatest challenges that we have.
Let's talk about the challenge of corruption and impunity. How do we deal with that? Engineer here said that the rich don't cause as much damage to this drainage system as the poor do. And we have also seen it when the president is allocating lands to investments. It's on the account of they will not cause as much damage.
They do. In fact, they are worse off. Because actually what they do is they create hills in valleys. They create hills in valleys. When the rich bring their so-called maram, they pour the maram that even they affect the neighboring area. Because eventually, those at the neighboring will be in the valleys. Yes. So that's the biggest challenge. And that's all about corruption. It's corruption. Because we have relevant laws that are supposed to secure our wetlands.
So how do we deal with that issue?
Number one, fight impunity.
How do you fight impunity?
Fight corruption.
When the whole system is impugned.
We have the rule of law. We have the laws of Uganda that are supposed to safeguard our wetlands. But they are not implemented. And the problem is with us leaders. I have told you that one time in Mugolobi, I found people pouring maram in garbage, and I swung in action. I went with the fuel, petrol, to burn their cars, their trucks, and they ran off. And up to now, they haven't. So we want to fight that impunity.
Okay.
And we are not going to accept the rich.
We all can't be carrying jerrycans of fuel.
No, I'm telling you, you go out of the way. You go out of the way because you go to police, they will never help you.
All right.
You go to the leaders, they will never help you. What do you do?
Mr. Sserunkuma, on that regard, we're in a generation where now more and more increasingly we see people taking matters into their own hands. We see collective efforts towards addressing some of these issues and challenges that are grappling our communities and our capital city. And so through, places like the social media platforms where you run exhibitions to just rally people to bring that collective chihukumu to address issues. Is that can deal or bring to light those that are corrupt so that they can be dealt with by those responsible authorities and the state?
Honorable Balimwezo reminds me of Kasirye Gwanga. There was a time where all of us wished we had Kasirye Gwanga as a brother or a relative, because Kasirye Gwanga dealt with impunity in his own way. It was admirable. It endeared him to many of us. The problem with Museveni's autocracy is that it's an empty autocracy. It's empty in the sense that it runs after folks organizing at Makere Kavle. It runs after people organizing at Kamosha, but it can't run after people who are destroying an entire ecosystem. The problem with technical people like Mr. Luyimbazi is that they tend to think that these problems are local, individual people, that there's not a system which enables them to happen. Now, what Honorable Balimwezo is showing us that there's a system which has sustained its time that enables this impunity to reproduce itself. Now, when you look at the poor people, he's 2 million people, when they settle in a wetland, they build ramshackle structures. When it rains, water runs through those structures. Those structures are washed away by the water, so they have to build afresh. Now, when his rich people build, they build permanent, non-washable structures. Those structures redirect water into a neighborhood. Look at Nakumatt. Nakumatt, the Garden City thing, is in a wetland. Centenary Park, that's not a poor person, it's in a wetland. I don't know what this man is talking about when he says poor people. When this place floods, Hamis Chigu downtown here in Old Kampala is not a poor person. Now, the damage that the natural channel destruction causes to this entire city is humongous. We can't focus on, you go to Kalere, for example. Kalere is a dingy neighborhood where people have built structures. Poor people, the wretched. When it rains, the joke in Kalere is that those houses are given away, are hawked, are rented during the dry season. And they're very cheap. They're rented during the dry season when there's no rain, to tell you. So the tenants who take into those dingies is when it rains, they have to relocate because rain runs through them.
Okay.
Water doesn't forget. But what Honorable Balimwezo said is that Luyimbazi is rich. We used to be a city of 7 hills. Now we're a city of more hills than 7,000 because he's rich. Have degraded this entire city. So if you ask the question where, as activists, are coming, because you see, we cannot be this man here. This man is a fighter, which I think has endeared him to the people of Nakawa. Neither can we be.
I emulate Gwanda. He came to my home before he died and gave me the mantle. He did.
That's a good sign.
You're aware of this, I think. He left me with his property.
That us ordinary folks, what we're left with is making noise. And what this have been doing is trying to react. People in Parliament also react when wananchi kubandulu. So what we're doing with our smartphones and taking pictures and kubandulu. But you see, this system has so much entrenched itself. The incompetence, the pivoting. You see, we focus on the rich people, and this man has to convince 2 million people have degraded Kampala while insisting that the problem is historical. Because the people living in those places growing mayuni, what do you guys talk mayuni? People used to cultivate those places, but they never ruined the entire ecosystem. So, talk about Kundulu, but the system is so entrenched that these technical people can't do much except sort of pivoting. That they are so entrenched that they are not listening. But we can't stop.
Right.
That's what we're doing.
Ronald, I'll come to you. Ronald, before we go in further, I'll come to you and we talk about benchmarking. What other cities are facing this kind of challenges, which we can benchmark for, solutions to our challenges. But engineer, in that regard, fingers being pointed at leadership of the authority, Ministry of Kampala, and then of course into the other levels of governance. It comes down to the fact that there seems to be tewali kulumirirwa from the leadership to see that there's fair address of these issues across the bar, from the rich to the poor. And it begs the question, how does a leadership so entrenched as they have said undo these wrongs for the future to come?
I'll handle the bull by the horns now. Kampala, right now I'm in the private sector, but I can talk. I know what was happening while I was there. We have a technical platform to manage the city. We also have a political platform. We have councillors who are managing all the different parishes in the city. They are sitting at City Hall. They sit and preside over the invasion of these wetlands. We're talking about corruption. These councillors take money from people who are allowed to go and reside in this wetland. It is not there's no technical person who, and when we go to try and evict them, that's where we are getting most resistance.
Okay, allow me to just pinch in. It's the technical person that signs off on the permit.
No, none of those people
it's
have...
It's not the council.
None of them have a...
It's the technical person that has a plan for the city or the community that we're talking about.
A building,
not the council.
To get a building permit, you need to have title of land. There is no title for anyone who has developed in a wetland, except, and those rich guys who were talking about.
So where do they get the title? This is you saying that from the Ministry of Lands, these titles don't exist.
No, for all the invaded wetlands by encroachers, there are no titles, except the wetlands that were degazetted. Like in Bogolobi, where Ronald Balimwezo has been fighting. The owner got a title because the wetland was degazetted by government. Okay? So there must be compliance with the law. Now, all the people who are in Kazoa, Angola, Katanga, there are no titles to those lands. So they cannot have a building permit. Now, the people who encourage them to go there are the politicians. Now, the politicians encourage them to go there, and when we were going to kind of enforce and remove them, that's where the political resistance would come in. So this issue of corruption, people may perceptively think it is the technical people who are corrupt. The politicians are more corrupt. And now, in Kampala, it's opposition in leadership. So if you think of corrupt people, you're going to catch the opposition leaders. They're the ones who encourage people to go and live in wetlands, suffer, they die, live in squalid conditions. They don't have any sanitation. You may say, yeah, they're not farming there. I've visited these wetlands. They're building permanent structures. They live in squalid conditions. Those kids, they stay awake the whole night whenever it floods. It's not the kind of life you'd give your child. I'm not saying this. They're poor because they cannot afford land in Kampala.
Okay, let me edit my question. What have been the failings on the side of leadership in order to address these issues?
Now, politicians look at these people in wetlands as voters. They are voters. To evict them, to remove them from places they're not supposed to reside is a political war. That's why the technical wing cannot do its work. So you go to remove, when we're preparing for the Non-Aligned Movement Summit, that Katanga channel, all of it was invaded. It was covered by illegal structures. We had a war with politicians. If one was supported by police to be able to clear the drainage reserve, water could not get to the lake at all. Water would back off up to that Gaba road. The road was permanently underwater because people had decided to dump, they were reclaiming land down there. They are perceptively poor, but they have money, by the way.
Okay.
They're building permanent structures.
All right.
So it is about greed, impunity, and these are supported by the politicians. That's why you hear no noise. Try to touch them, then you'll hear the noise at City Hall, in council.
Okay.
So if we're to speak the truth...
Engineer, you've been at the helm of leadership at KCCA, and your office had the power and the authority to decree and declare certain law and orders to actually exist in our city. Mm-hmm. Why didn't we see that?
The thing is, one, council has the ultimate authority to set laws and cause enforcement of the laws in the city. Don't assign it only to the technical wing. We as well as the political part of the... Well, if we were singing the same hymn book, there would be no encroachers in these wetlands. But we sing one tune, we say this is illegal. Another group says, these are voters, these are poor people, compensate them. We don't have money to even maintain the drains. You're asking us to now compensate people who have illegally invaded a place they should not be residing in.
All
right. In response, Sserunkuma.
To respond in Uganda.
No, speak in English.
Because Luyimbazi is so obsessed with the poor.
No, they're perceptive. They still have money to build permanent structures.
For this, please allow him to speak in Uganda so that...
No, we're unfortunately...
Those people that are affected can listen to what... Professor
we have our man on ground that will be able to translate, yes.
Let me remind Luyimbazi of an incident in near Gaba during the reign of Jennifer Msisi. There's a very interesting incident. He's trying to blame it with the opposition, where Jennifer Msisi tried to evict some people from a wetland. And the person who went there to stop Jennifer Msisi was Yoweri Museveni himself. Remember that incident where there were even gunshots?
I don't remember that incident.
You see, it's selective memory.
Let's bring it closer to the incident where you do have an election, 2016, I think, going into 2016, and she had evicted people, vendors from the streets, and then, you know, by the president's orders, they were put back on the streets. Please continue.
This man is obsessed with Kampala's poor. He forgets that the rich cause more damage than the poor. I don't know if studies have been done to show how much damage the Kampala rich, the extent of damage they cause to the environment when they put their mountains in wetlands. But that incident that I've just cited is very instructive, that Museveni sees the rich as funders of his regime. And this man is obsessed with the poor. Museveni is rich. Hamis Chugundu, Sdiru Pareria, the people of Majestic, Mera Investment, all those people are part of the small clique of Nyekundire who fund the system that Museveni serves. So that impunity grows straight from State House and then comes onto the streets of Kampala. You see, so this is why when you mentioned places like the core drainage channels, the core Nachivubu, when you mention those core places, the people draining, pouring marram and rocks in those places are not poor people. Yeah. And I don't know how much we have to emphasize at this point, that the poor cause minimal damage, and when it rains, the poor people's houses are washed away. I don't know how much you have to explain this, that when you say the problem is the historical, it means the conservation movement has, for a very long time, the people who have been in those places have used those places. But you see, Priscilla, I want to help Mr. Luyimbazi. It's not fair to put him on the spot. Clearly, this is not his time to respond to this thing. This is not his mandate. Why? This thing is way bigger than him. You see, the technical people at KCCA are equally victims. Yeah. You see, I don't know why this man is defending so much that, you know, the system, the poor. The technical people at KCCA, when Museveni recently appointed my Muslim sister, Buzechi, I remember writing on Twitter that the pain is, you know, being appointed to fail. You're put in a position where you're empowered to execute the demands of the appointment. When Chitez suffered, Chitez didn't suffer because of politicians, neither because of the technical people. Yeah. It was because when Museveni's government pulled out of Kampala City, it didn't just pull out from regulating what people do. It also pulled out the money. And it pulled out for political reasons. It pulled out for political reasons. So this man, we're being so unfair to Mr. Luyimbazi, putting you on the spot, looking at you like a government person who is supposed to respond.
Luyimbazi, you're being defended.
These things are bigger than you are.
He's trying to defend you. And actually, I would wish to also do the same.
You need to be put off the hook. This is not It's not your terrain. This thing is way bigger. Sharifa Uzeji is in that position, but I don't even know whether she knows the mandate, why she was put there. So, Sserunkuma, this is to say that if Bana Kampala can be wise enough in 2026 and vote more NRM representation in Kampala City, things would change for us?
Instead of suffering.
No. You need to understand the dynamics of Kampala. Is that first I started by saying it's a neoliberal city. We invested, we embraced a way of urbanization that we didn't fully understand. You start with the way we settle. You have your money, you can build wherever you want, in whichever you want, whichever type of house you want. This is why in Kampala, every house is seated on its own toilet. We don't have like a central drainage system. Every house is seated on its own toilet. The National Water and Sewerage Corporation, you know, which supposedly is responsible for sewerage as well, doesn't have like a unique, the way we have water, we don't have similar lines of sewerage running across the city. We don't have that. Right? So if you have your money, you can build wherever you want. This is why, since the very beginning, you have a city which had industrial areas. You remember that? No, now everywhere is an industrial area. As long as you have your money. Every place is an industrial area. You see, it used to be, we used to have Ginger as the industrial area. Now many of those people are coming to Kampala. You need to understand the crisis. The crisis is this. Why everybody thinks they have to settle in the closest proximity of City Square is because government also pulled out of the public transport system. Every single individual thinks about, how do I access downtown Kampala? And you realize that if you lived in Gayaza, which is about 15 kilometers from the city, if you lived in Gayaza, it will take you 2 hours to get to the city via taxi. So you realize why you say Kalere, Kanyanya, and the effect of that, even potential landlords, I think Mr. Luyimbazi is a landlord too, he must have houses in some of those wetlands. they also consider building rentable houses in the closest proximity of the city. Because farther, and by farther I don't mean say 20 or 30 kilometers farther, which is that if you go to Dar es Salaam, for example, it's a city of over 35 kilometers. You know, it's spread across 35 kilometers. And one of the things that they've invested in their public transport system, that you can live 20 kilometers away, and in a period of 40 minutes, you are in the center of the city. If you go to a place such as Mogadishu, which is really fun, where there's no government, it's also spread across over 18 kilometers apart. But if you live in Mukono and you want to access Kampala via taxi, you have to. Yeah, I said I come from Maganja, which is 6-7 kilometers from the city center. I need 2 hours, and I have a car. So I think about people who are using taxis, and they live further than that. You see, so the crisis is that these people forget about planning the city. So everybody, if you have your money, you can do whatever you want. And the effect of that is people who have bigger monies, like his friends, who he's trying to defend, they can build wherever they want. And because they have connection, they can get title and they can do whatever they want. The examples are here.
Mr. Balimwezo, you talked about the master plan, the drainage master plan, and you talked about the fact that we're not seeing its realization is because there's limited allocation of resources. That means that our priorities, our budgetary priorities at authority level are not aligning with the development that we want to see. Why is there that discrepancy?
You know, before I do that, let me give you the effects of poor planning and basically what we are losing in terms of money just in Kampala. We lose 240,000 man-hours in Jam. He has been talking about traveling from Maganja to Kampala 2 hours. It will require you 3 to 4 hours to travel from Jinja. And between the section of Mukono to Kampala, 2.5 hours. Simply because of our poor road infrastructure and at times as a result of poor planning. In monetary terms, we lose 10 trillion every year. These are reports from Collins, KCCA. 10 trillion every year as a result of poor planning in the city. It's only this time that we sat in Parliament and said, no, we should allocate at least enough funds for KCCA. And to date, we are at 916 billion. That's what we are trying to give KCC next financial year, starting June, to address some of these.
Yeah, but when you say that 900 billion, again, if we were to have an analysis of it, it's not really going directly into developing or improving on development of the city directly.
A lot of it is going on infrastructure development. At least roads and drainage.
Okay.
And we have funding from World Bank that is supposed to address some of these challenges, the drainage challenges. The unfortunate bit is that government of Uganda hasn't gotten its part to compensate the people. You know, the land tenure system has also become a challenge in Uganda. But government should realize that Kampala, the capital city of Uganda, the hub, economic hub, should be supported because roads contribute over 98% of the transport needs of Ugandans. And you cannot say you're not going to support roads and drainage and you think that you will have a viable economy. So it is this that must go in the ears of government, particularly the president of Uganda, to appreciate that Kampala, which contributes 72% to the national GDP, should be fed because it's the cash cow. I wouldn't love to forget that in Uganda we have beautiful laws that the executive should utilize, should implement. We have the best laws, and we at one time you were trying to ask me on benchmarking. Uganda was benchmarked on the wetland policy. Countries like Rwanda benchmarked here. South Africa benchmarked here. So we have good laws, we have good policies. The unfortunate bit is the implementation of these management tools. KCCA, the executive director, has a role of implementing policies, strategies, and programs that have been set by the council. Her role is to implement. The ED should not tell us that the councillors are the ones that are so corrupt to the extent of denying them an opportunity of executing their mandate. We saw what Jennifer Musi did. The only thing is that she did not consider people in Kampala in the planning of Kampala. Otherwise, if you brought these key stakeholders on board and not selectively apply the laws like it is happening now, there is selective application of the law. If you went to these areas where we have talked about, you will find SFC. I'm telling you this. Tell me the truth. You know this?
No, I don't.
You will find SFC securing these sites. Go to the city on these projects that are being built by the rich. You will find SFC. Go to Nachivubo. Go to the wetland of Mera. Even up to now, it's being guarded by SFC. And who is in charge? It is the executive. So we need to basically also benchmark cities like Rwanda. You know, in Uganda, we lack 2.4 million houses. And Kampala does not increase in terms of area.
So
we have a stress on the land to an extent of people encroaching on the wetland.
On that element
but also it's important.
Of benchmarking,
yes.
I had asked you earlier on what cities elsewhere we would benchmark on for the development we want to see for ours.
I will not take you far. Kigali. Kigali addressed the issue of wetland management in a proper way. They had also encroached on the wetland, but they reinstated the wetlands. Where there were no wetlands and they needed, they have created one. They have created dams. You talked about dam, retaining those retainers, you know. So they have done that. They have constructed houses for those poor that are encroached on the wetland. So their housing policy, I think we need to emulate from them, to emulate them.
Okay.
So we have a lot to learn from Rwanda.
Let's talk about
the issue of selective
politicization
application
of development of Kampala, right from top government into local government. How is it affecting the development that we want to see, and what would be the solutions?
Come again.
The politicization of affairs of Kampala, right from the KCCA and to top government through the Ministry of Kampala, and also related to local government. How do we get to resolve the issues?
So maybe before you respond to that, there's one small point I wanted to add to benchmarking cities. See, cities are not simply wetlands. It's a confluence of so many things. If you have to really plan a city, you have to think about a couple more things than just the wetlands. Our floods are not entirely simply wetlands. It's a master plan. When they talk about a master plan, it's actually a master plan, including many things, including wetlands, including roads, including areas of access, exit points, connecting roads. You talk about an industrial area,
residential, commercial,
heavy vehicles, where heavy vehicles concentrate, heavy machinery concentrates. So when you talk about a master plan, it's actually a master plan. It includes many, many things. So that when you look at, wetlands are just one of those components. It includes slums. When people come from the countryside, coming to the cities, which includes many of us, I don't know how about Mr. Luyimbazi, who came from...
Do you have to reference me at
from villages, is that the easiest point where you start to build your life is in a dingy neighborhood, mostly a slum. So slums tend to be core parts of a city.
Okay.
So they have to be planned with decent accommodation and access to many things. So slums are part of a city development, but a core aspect of it is public transport system. But if you don't solve that, everything else, you're barely scratching the surface. Because the public transport system determines the concentration.
And what you're saying is very true, and it does exist on paper at least. It does exist for a city. But again, I'll make reference to what happened in Chitezi, that decommissioning was a recommendation that was on the table
for 7 years
before.
For 7 years.
You know, the event happened, but for 7 years, same situation, same recycling of politics and other elements brought us to a place of Chitezi,
and we have
tragedy, losing people, and now they're not being compensated. Their monies are not being put into the next financial year's budget for whatever reasons. But anyway, this brings us to the politicization discussion.
Now, you know, I want our listeners...
I'd like you to just wrap
Yes, I want our listeners to note that politics influences policy, programs and strategies, which will enhance service delivery. So you cannot do away with politics. You can't. Because it has an influence too on service delivery. But I do think that for starters, the executive gives out these titles. I'll bring you that typical example. In the parliament, we come and raise these issues that they have given titles in wetlands. I rose that matter in parliament, and I requested for the cancellation of these titles. And they did actually, in cabinet, create a minute cancelling these titles. But eventually, President Museveni said, no, don't touch my investors.
All right.
So that is all influence, and which is affecting greatly. Okay. But on the other part, we may come out because of the selective application of the law. Why evict people of Chitezi and leave better investments? Why should someone build over a drainage system as you're looking on, and you cannot even take that person to courts of law?
All right.
So we say no to this. We say no to selective application. And this impunity must stop.
Mr. Sserunkuma, I'll ask for your closing remarks as the neutral factor on this table. The factor on this table.
I am a scholar. I'm neither member of the opposition. I look at this city with very, very endearing eyes. I love this city because this has given us identity. It has defined us. We came here with big dreams. This is our Kampala dream. It's being ruined. I would not say by people like Luyimbazi, but because you're also a victim in some way. But Priscilla, this is what I keep saying, that, you know, Kampala will need people who like this city. Because you see, one of the key things, you see, you himself has lived in the city for the last 40 years. But when voting time comes, he goes right to it. He doesn't see this place as home. The people who are running this government see Kampala as a workspace. It's not their home. They're like Kadamas in Kampala. You see, if you're a Kadama in Dubai, you don't think about developing Dubai, you think about developing where you come from. The people running this city don't see this place as home. They don't see why they should invest in developing this place. They see it as Uganda, which they can even get off the map of Uganda. Okay. They don't see it as home, because if they saw it as home, they will invest all their energy. Because if you get 67% of your revenue from this space, the most amount of investment would be in this place.
All right.
But they never do.
Okay, gentlemen, thank you so much for your submissions and 2 cents on the question. What is hindering Kampala's development? For which we have not really found a fundamental answer. So we will be returning to this table of discussion on a later date. We're being joined by Stephen Bide,